Live from Beit Shemesh and broadcasted around the world, you are listening to the Frum Entrepreneur Podcast with your host, Nachum Kligman. Interviews and advice from Jewish entrepreneurs from around the world. Listen, learn, be Matzliach.
Welcome to episode 19 of the Frum Entrepreneur. I am so excited to have you guys on board. First of all, I want to start off by just thanking each and every one of my listeners. You guys are awesome. It's been fantastic watching every episode that we produce, getting it out there, seeing more and more listeners from around the world. While the large majority of our listeners are from the U.S. and then secondary in Israel, a special shout out to our listeners in the UK, in Australia, in Paris. We actually have listeners in, almost all over the world, Canada. And I appreciate you guys taking your precious time and sharing with me and listening to our conversations. I started this podcast back in March, and it's really been one of the most fun things I've ever done as an entrepreneur. I love listening to other entrepreneurs. I love learning from them. And I love sharing this knowledge with other Frum people and, trying to build a community around entrepreneurship and learning from each other and helping each other. And there'll be more products and stuff coming out in the near future that I'll share with you guys. But at this point, I just wanted to say, again, thank you for listening and thank you for participating and thank you for sharing the message. If you love this podcast, I just do want to ask a couple of favors. One, if you can, if you're on iTunes, if you could rate this podcast, it really helps me out. It helps get higher ratings, and then more people will end up seeing it and listening to it. So if you're enjoying it, please rate it. And also, if you could share it with your friends. If you enjoyed an episode and you think you have a friend that would enjoy listening to it as well, please feel free to share these episodes with your family or friends or entrepreneurs or business people in your community, people that you think that would appreciate the content. We're just getting started with the Frum Entrepreneur. We have a nice lineup of entrepreneurs that have agreed to come on the show. Obviously, with the Chagim coming up, it's going to be a bit of a challenge to get everybody in. But, it's been the enthusiasm amongst entrepreneurs and amongst business people has been fantastic. If there's a specific entrepreneur you would like me to interview, please definitely reach out. You can just send an email to nachum@frumentrepreneur.com. And, we'll try to, I'm always available to answer questions. Maybe we'll answer some questions on a future podcast episode. But if there's any comments, definitely send me an email. If you want to hear somebody, send me an email. And, I want to make this enjoyable and fantastic for everybody. So today's episode, it's going to be all about fear. Fear is really what holds most people back from becoming an entrepreneur. And I want to go through a bunch of the different fears that people have, because really becoming an entrepreneur, if you listen to our previous podcasts, you'll see that one of the most common traits that people I've interviewed have is that they got over their fear, that they were not afraid to launch and to do something and to take steps, to take action. Right? It was the great Wayne Gretzky who said that you miss 100% of the shots you never take. And that is so true. We can't let our fears hold us back. And I think that's one of the, key components of an entrepreneur, and is that they have an idea and they're not afraid to move forward with it. So we're going to go through some of those fears. Maybe we'll talk about some stories. First, let me ask you a question. Which man was wealthier than Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Mark Zuckerberg, Larry Page, Sergey Brin, and Jeff Bezos combined? I'll give you a second to answer that or Google it, but I'll just give you the answer. The guy's name was Andrew Carnegie, who I'm sure you've all heard about. He had a hall. I'm just kidding. That's probably, it's just named after him. But Andrew Carnegie was a steel magnate and one of the wealthiest entrepreneurs. I think he was the second wealthiest American of all time. And he was, obviously he has, people learn from him and learn from his lessons still to this day. One of the things that he was known for was called flashes of lightning. And what is flashes of lightning? Basically, when Carnegie was hired for his first job and he was being interviewed for his job, the interviewee asked him, okay, when can you start? And his answer was, I can start right now. Now, most people, depending on when you're hired, depending on when you're asked, you may say, well, I have, an event planned already because I wasn't working, or I have I have vacation coming up with my family. I can't take off. I could start, in 2 weeks. How does that sound? Try to get that last hurrah in. If you're going to be starting a new job somewhere, you're going to, want to try to, put your affairs in order, or maybe have a good time first before you start this new job. And he says, don't do it. He said, that would be such a mistake. When he was offered his first job, he said, I can start right now. And he started right then. He said his feelings were that, if you have an opportunity, if you have that flash of lightning, jump on it, because you never know when an opportunity is going to come again, and you never know if you're going to lose it. If he would have said, I could start in a week or so, there could have been someone else that could have come in after him, or someone that works in the company that has a nephew that needs that same job, and it was not guaranteed. But once you have that opportunity, you seize it and you move forward with it. He says that is, grabbing that flash of lightning. And then many times throughout his business career, of course you have to. He says, you definitely have to look into situations. And he says, but be very, very careful in not overstudying, right? If you overstudy, if you overlook, if you overthink, right? And you're spending 10 hours, 20 hours, and you're going back and forth. He says, don't overthink. Learn to trust your gut. Learn to make a decision, and learn to grab an opportunity, or someone else grab that opportunity out from under you. So when you have an opportunity, when you're an entrepreneur, you have an idea for a business, take that flash of lightning, take that opportunity, and make it happen. Now, let's talk about some of the fears, because I think that's very important, and I think that is really what holds most people back from. And so we're going to talk about what I think the main fear. If I had to categorize what is the main fear and then what are the subcategories, I think the main fear that people have, and I think it's true with all walks of life, is fear of the unknown, right? People fear what they don't understand. People fear what they don't know. And that is a common fear throughout life, right? People are afraid to leave their comfort zone. And if you're not going to be able to leave your comfort zone, you're not going to be able to become a successful entrepreneur. You're not going to be able to open up your own business, because it's very easy to go to your 9-to-5 job, get paid by your boss, collect your paycheck every month, and, create your schedule. And, you don't like new things and, people throwing you off, or situations. And, if you want to become an entrepreneur, if you want to run your own business, things are going to happen. There is no 9 to 5. There is no punching in the clock and punching out. You're on call 24/6, right? So there is, you have to be able to get out of your comfort zone, realize that, not everything is going to work out the way you want it to. And it's not going to be a repetitive week after week, same job, same deal, same thing. Now, if you could look into the future and see how things will work out, right, then it would remove that fear. Like if you were able to see and know that, 3 years down the line, you're going to be successful, well, then you're not going to hold back and you're going to jump right in, because you'll be able to see that. But I have a little secret for you. That is not how life works, right? Nothing was ever done in this world based on knowledge of what the future will bring. Everything you do is always a risk, right? The school you send your kids to, the vacation you go on, the job that you're starting, anything that you do, you don't know how it's going to be. You don't know how it's going to play out. You don't know what kind of shkacha you're going to have. Obviously, that's why, as Frum Jews, having emunah and putting your best foot forward is always the most important thing. And, I often say that, if it wasn't for emunah, I don't understand how people could live without emunah. Right? If you don't have emunah, how do you get through the tough times? How do you get through, you understand that, everybody has their pekala, as they say. How do you get through those rough pekalas? How do you get through those rough times? And, Baruch Hashem, we have that emunah, we have that knowledge, knowing that everything is from Hashem. So if we know that everything is from Hashem, then we shouldn't fear the unknown, right? We fear Hashem, and we should be taken care of by putting in our proper hishtadlus. And let's discuss a few more of those fears. So fear of failure is a big one. I think that's the number one thing, the number one subcategory, I should say, is fear of failure. Right? People are so worried about what other people will think that they won't take the risks, wondering what people will say about them if they fail. Right? You ever come across that? You feel like, hey, I want to do this, but hey, what happens if I fail? What will people say in shul? What will the hanhala of my kids' schools think? What will my parents think? What will my friends and relatives think? Right? So people rather would, not take that risk than to fail. Well, I'll tell you that there are actually venture capitalist firms out there that won't invest in a first-time entrepreneur. They want to invest in somebody that has failed before. Because once you failed at something, You know how to, it's an incredible lesson. You've learned from your mistakes, and the chances are, the next time you'll have a greater chance at succeeding. Someone who has never failed, doesn't know, it hasn't learned the lessons and could be too flighty, could be too much of flaky maybe, But when you failed at something, you're definitely more grounded. You're going to take your next venture more serious, and you're going to have more experience. And so there are VCs out there that won't even invest in somebody unless you failed. And if you want to talk about, people that have failed, we could talk, there's been a lot of them, famous people. We could talk about Steven Spielberg, who was rejected from film school 3 times. Right? You could talk about the famous author, Stephen King. His first book, Carrie, was rejected 30 times from publishing companies. Michael Jordan, he was cut from his high school basketball team. Even Stephen Jobs, the famous Stephen Jobs we know from Apple, he was removed from the company that he started. He was removed from Apple, before coming back later and turning it into the largest company in the world. Who else did I heard? The comedian Jerry Seinfeld, right? Jerry Seinfeld, the first time he ever went up on stage, he got booed off of the stage, right? And so, failing is not something to be ashamed of. Failing is not something to be looked down upon. And if you see somebody failed, I look at someone that had a failed business and I'm like, good for them. I feel bad for them that they went through it. But you know what? I admire them and I respect them because they got out of their comfort zone. They tried to make a change in the world. They tried to do something that was different and to go out there. And to me, that's a very admirable trait. Let me just see if there's, Walt Disney was also, people made fun of him when he showed him his little mouse, a guy named Mickey. People laughed at him and said, that'll never work. Who's going to want to watch a little mouse? And so, failing, I think also, Thomas Edison, Albert Einstein, you go through the greatest names in business and in anything. And it's very rare that you'll find somebody that hasn't failed many times before becoming a success. Now, of course, you only hear about the successes, right? Because that's what people like to celebrate. That's what people like to talk about. But you don't always hear the story behind the story or what led up to that success. Okay, so let's another fear, let's say, which could be a little bit similar, is fear of ridicule, right? People are afraid of being laughed at. People are afraid of people, pointing and looking at them and saying, haha, what do you think you're doing? You think you're such a hotshot. You think you're such a macher. You're going to go out and make some money. People don't want to be exposed to that. People are told that they're crazy, that how can you do it? You're not going to be successful. Who are you to think that you could run or start a business? And truth is, I think it's one of the most saddest things that we may have in our community. Or, Baruch Hashem, actually, I shouldn't even say that. It could be the large majority of people don't look at entrepreneurs like that. But if you have an entrepreneur, whether it's a relative, a friend, or somebody you don't know, you should encourage that person. You should, admire that person. You should help that person. See, you can lend a hand. When an entrepreneur in our community is successful, it brings success to the whole community. Right, it brings more money into the mostos in that community. It creates more jobs probably for people in the community, and it's definitely and then that entrepreneur, when he's successful, he may help others become more successful and give advice to other people in the community. I think a lot of people may be jealous of entrepreneurs, right? Because most people, entrepreneurship is not for everybody. Starting a business is not for everybody, and I think there are a lot more people that want to start a business but won't because of these fears or other reasons. And so when someone else does try to do it and they're able to take that leap, they tend to look down at them or be jealous about them because they feel, hey, why can he do it and I can't do it? And because I can't do it, that means he also can't do it. Well, I think that's the wrong attitude. I think we need to be very supportive. And first of all, I think you could do it. I think anybody could really start a business or start a company with the proper due diligence and the proper, product or idea. But the lifestyle may not be for everybody and the risk taking is not for everybody. But if you have an idea, instead of looking down on others, look up at them, learn from them, try to partner with them, try to help them. And you may be inspired yourself to, move out of your comfort zone and to go out and to start a new business. So first of all, obviously, besides the fact that it's usher to make fun of people and to laugh at them and to put them down, it's a huge mitzvah on the other end to inspire and to, bring joy and to pump up. Now, obviously, if you see an entrepreneur who's making a mistake and you feel they're making a mistake, obviously, when it's come for toelas and you want to help that person, obviously it's a great thing. It's a great mitzvah to sit down with them and not out of ridicule, but out of, honestly wanting to help the person definitely step up to the plate. I think, that is most welcome by most entrepreneurs. But just the laughing at or pointing at or, people putting down other people, I think that's just wrong. And we need to be more supportive of our entrepreneurs. Another fear that people have is fear of rejection, right? Nobody likes to be rejected. But as an entrepreneur, you have to learn to not take rejection personally, right? Rejection is a part of life. Some things are just not meant to be, just like shidduchim, right? Some people could go out and 10, 20, 30 shidduchim and get rejected 10, 20, 30 times before they find their proper zivig, right? And of course, any time that a person is rejected, it hurts. It is a little painful, but if you realize that it was just not for the best, I can't tell you how many times, I'm sure other business people out there that, they thought they had the greatest opportunity. They thought they had I had a guy who wanted to invest in one of my companies, and it got to the stage, we went to the lawyers and we made an agreement and he was ready to wire the money. And then at the last second, he backed out. Now, what he didn't know was that I was also negotiating with another investor that wanted to put money in. And I turned them down because I had agreed to his deal. And so at the time I felt terrible. It was very painful. I was like, oh my gosh, not only did I lose this guy who was giving me a great deal and I thought, I was finally gonna be able to launch my company and, take it to the next level. But but I turned down the other investors, because I thought this was a done deal. And so, but Baruch Hashem, looking at it now, this investor that at the last minute broke out of our agreement, it ended up being a tremendous bracha because he ended up, I've heard from other people that he was not as successful himself as he thought he was, and that he didn't really play things straight, and it would have been a nightmare investor for my company. So even though at the time it hurt, obviously everything is from Shemayim, and just some things are not meant to be. And, we have to take these type of rejections and just look at them in the positive. Right? You have to think about yourself. It's just impossible to get a yes from everybody. Can you imagine yourself if you said yes to every time somebody came to you for something? Every person that came to you for asking for tzedakah, can you say yes to? Every person that, asks you and wants to sell you something, do you say yes to? It's just impossible. It's not how the way things work. There could be 100 reasons why someone says no to you. And it's not personal, right? You have to learn how to take rejection as a numbers game, as something that is just part of your stylus and trying to build something, right? And and you're going to be rejected. You're going to be rejected a lot by investors. You're going to be rejected a lot by potential partners, or especially by customers, right? There are going to be some people that are just going to say no to you. And I think that's not a negative thing, because first of all, you want to find, when it comes especially with customers, you want to find your customer base of people that are going to love your product and become a fan of your product. And if you have to convince somebody and twist their arm, even if they, say no at first and then they say yes, but that's not the type of customer you're going to want to have. So when someone says no to you, when a customer says no to you, you should be happy, because that's not the customer you want to work with. That's not the customer that's going to help you build your brand and help promote your products, right? So you have to look at it like that. And when someone says no, it's just, you may have less customers, but the customers you do have will be the tribe and the customers that you want to have, right? So I'll give you just a bit of advice that has worked for me, both when I was doing sales and when I was going after investments. And that is whenever I before I made a sales call, before I went into a meeting, before I went to an investor pitch, I always said the same thing. I always took a minute or two and talked to Hashem. And I said, Rebbeinu Shalom, I said, I'm about to go into this meeting. I said, please put the right words into my mouth. If this business deal will not be good for me, then please don't let it work, even though I may want it to work. And if it is good for me, please let it happen, and please let the process be simple. And I took myself out of it and I put it into the hands of Hashem. And all we could do is we could make the meeting, we could go after it, and we could try our best to impress. We could try to, show our product in the best light possible. But not everything that we do, but success in that meeting, success in that sale is really in the hands of Hashem. And when we put it in Hashem's hands, it's a lot easier to handle, A, when there is rejection, and B, when we are successful, it's very important to remember that our success is not about us, that the success does come from Hashem. And that's another thing that really, maybe it's a topic for another podcast, but I think that is something important that people should realize, that our success is not in our hands. So when someone's successful, and we should all be successful, but remember to put that success and that thanks into HaKadosh Baruch Hu's hand, and it's not our own hand that made us successful, but is Hashem. Another fear that people have is fear that you lack the experience or expertise or education to succeed. Richard Branson once said that the best way of learning about anything is by doing. I'm a big believer in that. I think that by taking action, by going after and starting something is the best way to learn about it. Experience is the best teacher and the best way to learn something. And, I think that's with everything in life. If you could read about business and you could, take a course on business and, go to get your MBA, but until you're out there in the field, until you're actually doing, right, it's a world of difference. And, so, when it comes to education, even formal education, it can be a waste of time for a lot of people. In one of my previous episodes, I think it was Mayor Goodman that he said that he felt college was a waste of time, a complete waste of time. And I think for a lot of people that has been the way. And if you look about formal education and you do a search on, what's better, working or going to college, or is college as important as it once was, you'll see that there's a lot of material written about this today. Because, going to university does not necessarily mean you're going to be more successful than someone who hasn't. If we could go through some of the names of some of the famous entrepreneurs out there that dropped out of university, I think you may be surprised. I mean, we have Michael Dell, Yid, and founder of Dell Computers. Steve Jobs also left college. Bill Gates from Microsoft, heard of him, the wealthiest person in the world today. He dropped out of college. Evan Williams, the co-founder of Twitter. Mark Zuckerberg, he runs a little website called Facebook that he dropped out of college. Larry Ellison, another Yid, who is the founder of Oracle, he dropped out of college. And it's not just entrepreneurs and business people, but even presidents of the United States. Did you know that Abraham Lincoln never went to college? There is actually one of the Republicans running for president today, Scott Walker. He dropped out of college, right? And he's running for president. And so there are actually a few presidents that didn't go to university, whereas let me see who else. Abraham Lincoln didn't. George Washington took a course, but he didn't graduate college. Andrew Jackson, Zachary Taylor, Andrew Johnson, Grover Cleveland. Those are other presidents that did not graduate from college. So college and university, and you also have heard about a lot of lawyers that have degrees that that are on the fence, that are not able to get jobs coming out of college anymore. Now, obviously, if you want to be a doctor, if you want to be a lawyer, if you have a specific occupation, you're not going to become a doctor without going to college. It's just that simple, unless you're the Rambam, right? But if you're a business person and, is it better to spend $100,000 in 4 years of your life going to college to get an MBA, or is it better to just go out into the world and start something and learn from doing? And I'm not saying that education is bad. I think it is very important to be educated. I just think wasting the money, hundreds of thousands of dollars on it and spending, years of your life doing it, I think is a waste. Today, if you want to be an entrepreneur, if you want to be successful, there's tons of online courses that you can take. There are podcasts like this that you could listen to. There are books that have been written on every aspect of entrepreneurship that you're definitely going to want to learn. And I think learning from other people and learning from yourself and going to events are great ways of learning that would be a lot less expensive and really hammers in the points, because the world today is changing at such a fast pace that it could be that by the time you graduate, what you learned in your freshman year could be worth nothing by the time you graduate and get into the real world, right? Things are moving so fast, the new technologies, the new opportunities, things are happening all the time at a quick pace, that not necessarily what worked before in education is going to work today. So you always got to be educated. I definitely am an advocate of reading great business books and marketing books and learning from other people. I think it's definitely important, but for formal education, it's not what it once was. And let's go on to another fear. You could have a fear of not being good enough, right? You may think like, who am I to start a business? Who says my idea is good enough? So first of all, when you have an idea, it could be true. It could be true that your idea is not good enough. But if you do the proper research and, you speak to consultants and you speak to friends and you speak to potential customers and you do your research, right, then that'll remove that fear, right? Not every idea is worth doing, but every idea is worth looking into. And so, if you do your work, if you do your list and you research potential customers, and you speak to consultants, you speak to friends or people in the field, and your people are saying, yeah, it's a good idea, it's a good idea, it's a good idea, then don't worry, don't have fear of it not being a good idea. And as yourself being an entrepreneur, listen, it's never too late to start a business, never too late to start a company. And you shouldn't have, if you need to be pumped up about yourself, there's definitely books out there that can help you. But, every person was given skills by Hashem. Everybody has a brain. Everybody has certain talents. Now, again, entrepreneurship is not for everybody, and not everybody is meant to do it. But if you have an idea and you want to go and do it, don't think that you don't have the skills and tools that you have to be a successful entrepreneur, because the chances are that you have those skills and you have that, and you have ideas, and they may improve, right? Let's take, public speaking for an example. People say, I can never public speak. It's the worst thing. It's hard. It's a very scary thing to speak publicly. And that could be true. It says, but the more you do it, the less scared it is. If you listen to my podcasts, then the first podcast I was doing, I was a lot more nervous. Now I've gotten a lot more comfortable on the microphone just because I've been doing it a lot more. And so I have more confidence in myself. I have more confidence in my interviews and being able to, do a podcast like this episode, right? But that, if fear held me back from ever getting started, I would never have done this. I would never have done any of the business I've started, right? So, I think that you should not have a fear of not being good enough. I think if you have the drive, if you have the passion, if you have the right idea, then you're good enough to do it. Now we'll talk about, there's a bunch more fears, but I don't want to take too much longer on this particular episode. But let's take a common fear that someone has, and it's a different type of fear. It's a fear of someone taking your idea. And, that happens a lot where people say, I have this idea, I have this great idea, but I don't want to tell anybody. And, people that ask me to sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, I pretty much laugh at them, because there's no way, I can sign an NDA when people come to me literally every week or so with an idea. I shouldn't say every week, but definitely, a few times a month, and sometimes multiple times a week, people come to me with an idea and, what do you think about it? So I can't sign an NDA because I'm in the business of helping people take their ideas and start them and launch their businesses. But people are so worried about someone's going to steal their idea that they won't tell anybody about it, and they won't get the help that they need. And that to me is a huge mistake, because, if just because someone hears your idea, so you think that person is now going to stop what they're doing, quit their job or quit their other companies, or, stop being an investor because now they have this idea and they're going to go out and make millions. I'm a big proponent of having a good idea, and I think ideas are mamish, a gift from Hashem. But there is something to say about execution and executing on the idea, and the amount of passion that you need and the amount of effort you need in order to take an idea from the idea stage to launch and then to success, is a lot more difficult than just someone to do. Like, not everybody can take your idea and run with it. And if you're too nervous about somebody doing it, I think it's a big mistake. I'll tell you, there was a couple of, I guess about a year ago or so, a person came into my office and he had a fantastic idea. And I thought it was great, but he was a little bit on the older side, and he had this idea for 10 years, and he had it patented actually like 5 years ago. And he was so scared about anybody hearing about his idea and taking it that he just couldn't move forward. I offered him a fantastic idea. I told him I wouldn't take any money from him for consulting. I would just take a piece of the pie, because he was already, I think he was in his 60s, and really all he wanted to do was sit and learn. But he had this idea and he needed the money, but he's been sitting on the idea for almost 10 years at that point. And it's a chaval, because he just couldn't share that information. First of all, it took a lot, it took a lot of back and forth with him, and him looking into me and studying me and finding out about me before he would even share the idea with me, because he was afraid that I would take the idea and run with it. And, but once he trusted me, then, now let's talk to designers. Let's talk to potential investors. Well, no, I don't know who it is. Anyway, he just couldn't let go. And actually, another aspect of it along the same lines was that he didn't want to, and that's actually probably a subject for another podcast as well, is that he didn't want to give up enough equity in the company to get it going. He'd rather own 100% of nothing than 50% of something. And that was also a big mistake. And it's a big mistake that people make. And I've seen it time and time again where, they don't want to give up the equity that they need in order to become successful. And it is very important to realize that even a small piece of something successful is worth a lot more than something large that doesn't go anywhere. So if you want to be successful, you're going to need other players. You're going to need help, and you need to inspire and give people, an upsell, especially if you want good people on board in order to help make it successful. And if you're not willing to do that, yeah, you may be stuck with 70% of your company, but, you're never going to get anywhere with it, or you're not going to get the people on board that you need to help make it successful. But again, that's probably the a topic for another podcast episode. Anyway, that was some of the fears. Don't be fearful. The only thing we really need to fear is Hashem, and that's the truth. And the more that we realize, the more that we fear Hashem, and the more that we play by Hashem's rules, the less we have to fear about everything else. Right? You follow Hashem's rules, you follow the Torah, and you put in your best ishtadlus possible, then all these other fears should go away. Right? And I think that's an important lesson for everybody in every stage of life, that realizing that really the only thing we should fear is a Kadosh Baruch Hu. And obviously, we have to fear our parents. It's halacha. And, what type of fear are we talking about? But when it comes to all these other fears we just talked about, get rid of them, throw them away, bundle them up, and take action. Take that step. Don't be the person that looks back and say, oh, why didn't I start that company when I could have? Why didn't I seize the moment? Why didn't I take that lightning bolt and run with it? And, these ideas, when you get a good idea, it is a gift from Hashem. And you have to say, why did Hashem give me that good idea? So move forward, be inspired, be mitzliach. Wishing you all a lot of success. And thank you again for listening. And please help share this podcast with others. And wishing you guys all nothing but bracha.
Thank you for listening to the Frum Entrepreneur Podcast with Nachum Kligman. We hope you learned something valuable, and we'll share this with your friends. For show notes, archives of previous episodes, and more information to help you start and grow your business, please visit our website.